People who watch security cameras, what is the most creepy or bizarre thing you have ever witnessed? I used to work security night shift in a 34-floor hotel. While doing my rounds, I walked by the gym to see a huge hole in the wall. We are talking 1x 1.5 m, with one of our potted ferns dragged in front to pathetically try to cover it. After reviewing video footage, I found this 300-plus man running on the treadmill. The man had probably never used one in his life and seemed to be struggling with the controls. He was running faster and faster and eventually could not keep up. He went flying off, rammed into the wall, and stayed down for at least 5 minutes. He eventually got up, covered up the hole with the fern, and walked out. Was on the opposite end of this. Worked IT at a fairly big company. I used a scooter to move around the tile floor building while fixing things from room to room. Well, one day, most of the employees were in a big meeting room, meeting about something. I just so happened to need to go into that room to restart a switch. Now, I was really good at drifting corners on said scooter and had made a habit of doing this around corners. Yeah, I know. Well, unbeknownst to me, not only were they having a meeting in that room, but there was also water spilled right in front of it. So, right as I drifted around the corner, I hit the water, lost control, and absolutely slammed into a metal industrial fan they had at the entrance. It was fucking loud, and of course, I caused the whole meeting to stop mid whatever they were talking about. The head presenter saw the whole thing and was doubled over from laughing. Most everyone else was just confused. 2 weeks later, I get asked to come help set up something that broke right during our meeting. I show up to the same room with the same people. As soon as I walk in, the CEO/owner pops open the video footage on the projector for everyone to see. I am not gonna lie, it was pretty damn funny. Worked in a well-known discount retailer a few years ago and was friendly with the store detectives. One day, they called me into their camera room to show me some footage they got over the weekend. Several overhead views showed a middle-aged man lingering behind various young women, looking all around, waiting for his window, then bending down quickly to sniff their intimate parts. He was slick. None of them seemed to notice this guy crouched right behind them with his face just a couple inches away. They got him on camera doing this like 4 or 5 times before they tracked him down and told him to leave the store. I work weekends at a hospital for a security company with hundreds of cameras all over the hospital. I am frequently assigned to be the officer who watches cameras in the rooms of patients under observation, threats to self or nursing staff, and have access to the files in our archives. The most bizarre thing I have ever seen, in the archives, is one of the patients under observation escaping security and making it all the way to his car, completely naked. This guy was admitted for reasons that I have only heard secondhand. He was young, maybe mid-20s, and looked normal compared to most of the psychiatric patients that come into the ER. Most likely delusional and a danger to himself. But the key to his story was that he came to the hospital for help with his problems but did not know that by telling us he was suicidal, a doctor would order him under observation, and he would be unable to leave the hospital whenever he wished. Now, the process of getting care for mental health issues in an emergency room can take hours because the specialized staff are off-site, and only one is present on campus at any given time. He decided that he could not wait and that coming to the ER was a mistake, so he decided to escape. However, this particular patient was smarter than your average case. He took note of the cameras, the angles of each one, and watched the other patients nearby intently as they were escorted by security to a completely stripped, special bathroom. As the security guard in the small room that joined with his and a few other patients' rooms opened a door to the adjacent hall, where the bathroom was located, the guard would immediately turn their attention to the other patients. Next to the bathroom was another observation room, but that guard was usually seated. Both of these officers, he seemed to gather from the smirk on his face, were not allowed under any circumstance to leave their post unless removed. Anyone running from this officer would have a huge head start before a free officer could be summoned over the radio. All he had to do was get out of reach of the nearest one, and they would not be able to follow. There was one problem. The bathroom door opened up toward the seated guard in the hallway. Apparently, he had devised a solution to this problem and asked the first guard to use the bathroom. Everything goes as planned, from his point of view. Guard number 1 opens the door, lets him walk into the hall, and then goes back to the other patients. Guard number 2 remains seated and watches to make sure he actually goes in. He is in the bathroom for almost 10 minutes, and the guard in the hall notices but does not change anything about his routine. While the patient was in the bathroom, no camera, he stripped completely naked and lubed up his entire body in a thick layer of hand soap and water. The now fully lubricated patient, I imagine, took a deep breath and flung open the door as hard as he could. The camera files show the seated guard almost falling back out of his rolling chair in surprise. He had not even come to terms with the fact that he was going to have to grab a curiously shiny naked man when the man took 5 long strides down the hall at full speed and turned the corner toward the waiting room. The patients in the waiting room just froze in shock, and the guards by the entrance/exit started running toward him. Half a dozen nurses and half a dozen security guards grabbed at him with gloved hands, but every single one of them came up with nothing. None of them could get in front of him, and any attempt to grab the lubed-up streaker failed. Some guards were holding their heads, mouthing, "What the fuck," and others were in full sprint after him. He made it in under 30 seconds out of the hospital and onto the sidewalk that led to the parking garage. He made it all the way to his car, but no further. No keys. Oh man, I got some doozies. Got a few years under my belt doing this, so let's go. Watched a guy knock an automatic sliding door completely off the track because he was too busy looking at his phone. Had to call in a tech to fix it. Watched another guy try and steal a spinner of sunglasses, only to misjudge which automatic door opened and slam into it, sending glasses flying everywhere. He got away with the fixture and maybe 4 pairs of glasses. Watched one chick pull out a pair of bolt cutters from her purse to cut the security wire on some handbags. She cut 2 wires and ran off with 4 bags. She got caught later that afternoon. I watched a poor old lady stop in front of the escalator briefly, and when she moved, there was a brown spot on the floor. She had started to shit herself and tracked it up the escalator and halfway across the store to the bathroom. When she was done and came out, she continued shopping like nothing happened. Our store was a biohazard for the rest of the day. I got a lot more of these if you guys want them. Watched a girl buy a gumball from our machine, chew it, and stick it to a dress, then go back to her mom. Once we confronted her about it, she replied, "I didn't do that." We told her we had it on camera, and she changed it to, "I shouldn't have done that." Turns out her mom had just told her not to buy a gumball and was livid. She immediately stopped what she was doing, left with her daughter in tow, and told us she'd handle it at home. Never saw them again. Was closing one night, and when we went to roll down the blast door, a giant 3-foot snake fell out of it. Luckily, it was already dead. No one believed us till we played the footage. I have watched people come in, purposefully damage merchandise, then point it out to an employee and try to buy it at a discount. Watched one chick take $800 plus worth of merchandise into a fitting room and come out with a full shopping bag. When she tried to leave, she ran into someone she knew and decided to wander the store with them for an hour before attempting to leave again. Watched a guy pop the curb in his 4x4 truck and drive all the way to the doors so his wife could hop out and run in since it was raining. People are weird, man. It was pretty well known that our old security cameras had not worked properly in quite a while, but we also did not try to hide the fact that we were in the process of replacing them either. Apparently, one of our employees did not quite believe that the new ones actually worked. So our boss walks in and sees the employee with his car in the warehouse, washing it. The guy then proceeds to walk over to the clock and punch out. My boss then confronts him about having his car in the warehouse, washing it, and doing all this on company time. Of course, the employee denied everything, while his car was still in the warehouse, dripping wet. He was suspended immediately and called his union rep. He denied everything the whole time, seemingly banking on the idea of, "Hey, you have no proof, and it is your word against mine," until one of the managers pulled up the security footage. The problem was that not only did the cameras show exactly what he was doing, but they also caught him filling his trunk with several boxes of product before he started washing the car. His only statement after that, in a half-dejected, half-sarcastic tone, was to ask, "So I am fired, right?" "Yup. I am a security monitor for a tech company. We monitor alarms and cameras for our buildings across the whole globe. Here are a few that stand out to me. Panic alarm received from Shanghai. Upon launching footage, I can see a group of people on one side of a glass door, and on the other side, some dude trying to light something with a lighter. They are all holding the door shut to prevent this guy from gaining access. Eventually, one of our security guards goes through the door and gets into a scuffle, at which point he was stabbed twice by this guy. Blood everywhere, but he managed to apprehend the dude anyway. The assailant had just gotten fired and was looking for revenge. Several door alarms somewhere in San Francisco. Some guy, without any clothes, somehow managed to get into the building and was rolling around on the floor, leaving excrement everywhere. Notified of a vehicle accident. Rolled back the footage to watch a guy on a motorcycle get run over by a bus and die. It is July 4th. Door alarm received in Iowa somewhere. Notice that there is authorized personnel in the area. No big deal, sometimes these happen if the door was not opened smoothly. Let's roll back the footage, and, yeah, there is the receptionist getting a little too comfortable with some guy on the desk. Took him about 2 minutes. I have seen all sorts of stuff. A dude's vape exploded in his hand, a girl jumped off a balcony and died, black bears, a guy got severely injured when a glass door shattered as he opened it. Yeah, the world can be gnarly. I worked security at Best Buy and watched a dude take one of our security cases with an iPod in it to the car audio department, take out a large knife, and stab the box in an attempt to break it open and steal the iPod. The car audio department was in one of the corners of the store, and with myself and the managers watching this guy, we could hear him stab the box. It was so loud. Once the managers told him that the police were on the way, the guy proceeded to freak out and hand over his knife to the manager. But the manager freaked out, thinking he was pulling a knife on him, and since I was on the phone with dispatch, I freaked out and told them he pulled the knife on the manager. A flood of cops poured in. I work at a hospital as a security officer. We have a large number of cameras, most of them in hallways and at the exits. There is one camera that monitors the entrance to our ER and another that monitors the hallway just beyond it, leading to respiratory therapy and the ER/CCS charge nurse office. It is empty most of the time and out of sight of the people in the ER. Anyway, I try not to let anything I see at work get to me, but I saw something a little while ago that really impacted me. We had a young man brought in. He was in an accident and in really bad shape. His family was just outside the ER entrance, a whole group of people pacing, worrying, wondering, and hoping. I always watch when something like this is happening because family members with potentially dying loved ones are not always rational, understandably so, and sometimes I need to step in to keep everything civil. I had my eye on them while the nursing staff worked on this young man, and one family member stood out to me in particular. His father stood, stony and silent. I could see him occasionally hug and console crying people. He was really helping to keep everyone together, you could tell. When the doctor came out, it was clear the patient had passed away. Everyone reacted to the news very visibly. The whole time, he kept it together, hugging and consoling people, talking to them, all without breaking. One by one, he saw them all off, until it was just him and his wife. He held his wife for a while as she cried, and then she went outside to smoke, and he did not follow. He stared at a wall for a while, then slowly trudged away from the entrance, into the hall, and around the corner, out of view of everyone. Everyone but me. He leaned against the wall, his shoulders began to heave, and he collapsed, alone at last, not needing to be strong for anyone. And he wept for his boy. There was a reserved parking sign in an alleyway, tucked into a corner of a building. Two things would happen with this sign every single night. First, there was your usual drunken attempt to climb it, which inevitably led to someone falling off. We would have to send someone out to check if they were injured, inform them it was all on camera, and call for emergency services if necessary. Sometimes the larger people would make it to the top and bend the aluminum post over on their way down. We had to go bend it back, and every month it was replaced because it had broken off completely. Eventually, they bolted the pole to the wall, which just encouraged more people to climb it. Next, occasionally the reserved parking would actually be used, which gave a corner and a car between which people would feel enough privacy to relieve themselves. Usually just pissing in the corner, but often we would see a turd. Sometimes people would go try to pass out there, thinking they were unseen, only to get woken up by someone peeing and it running down over them. Then there was the incident. What happens when a rather large, rather drunk lady tries climbing the pole and pissing inside the pole itself? The bolts rip out of the wall, the pole bends, she slips and goes headfirst to the concrete, but her pants are down and get caught. So she is hanging upside down on the pole, and with enough alcohol in her system, the sudden movement makes her blood pressure drop, and she passes out. And then comes the turd. She is hanging upside down, mostly naked, covered in her own bodily waste, with a long streak of excrement down her back, unconscious when the paramedics arrive. They get her down, she wakes up, panics, and runs. Forgetting her pants are still on the pole. Paramedics and security are left scratching our heads. I had to fill out the incident report. This time, they took the sign itself and put it right onto the wall, like they should have the first time. I worked the front desk at an apartment building. I had this guy acting really weird, maybe 19, come to my desk. He said he just needed to check on his friend. He said he had visited her before and knew her floor but did not remember her apartment number. I asked for her name, and he would not give it to me. He gave me her birthday and floor, but that was it. He said she was ignoring him, and he wanted to talk to her. I refused him for about 20 minutes, and that was the end of that. Until I got a call from a resident about a guy that had been watching her building all day. I checked the cameras, and this guy had been standing outside the building he thought she lived in all day. In the rain. He just had this bright blue umbrella and would walk through the parking lot, staring at the building. Every 30 minutes or so, he would go in, take the elevator to the top floor, and check every floor of the building. I finally found the card he was using to get into the building, and it was not his. He had stolen it from a friend. I checked the file for that apartment, and this guy had been denied residency in our apartments. I checked his Facebook page, and my heart sank. It was him posing with various handguns and assault rifles. I immediately called the police, who found him and talked to him. He was completely hysterical and refused to leave the premises. Mind you, this was a kid who was maybe 5 feet 3 inches and 140, the cops won. I finally found out who he was looking for, and he was looking at the wrong building, thank God. I called and warned her, and she said they had been on one date and she was not interested. It was so scary because I was only a 19-year-old girl in a security/receptionist position, and I was in charge of the situation. I had plans to lock myself in the bathroom and call the cops if he came back. It was so scary. Not really bizarre, more completely assholish, but a security camera saved my job. I was working the register in a gas station as a teen, and we had these blank credit cards for companies with accounts that always stayed in the register. One was for a towing company and was used frequently. The other was for the city, and in 4 years, I had never had anyone use it. One day, a guy in a city fire department car came in, saying that he was told they had an account. I asked if it was the city account, and he just shrugged and said, "I do not know. I was just told we had an account." I was a little concerned that he might have gotten the wrong station since there was another station across the street, so I asked the night supervisor if he knew who was supposed to be able to use that card. He did not really know anything about it, and after a minute of ing about it, he finally said that it was probably the right card and that he would take responsibility if it was not. Sounded good to me, so I told the guy to fill up. He came in, signed the docket, and that was that. I had the next 2 days off, and when I came back, one of the mechanics was like a giddy teenager, saying, "Ooh, wait until you hear what happened while you were away." I had no idea what he was talking about, so I asked the manager. Turns out the firefighter guy came into the station on my day off with the fire chief, claiming that I did not want to let him use the account because he was black and that I used all kinds of racial slurs. I could not believe my ears because that could not be further from the truth. Fortunately, those security cameras had recently been installed, and the guy clearly did not realize there was a microphone as well. My manager took both the guy and the fire chief into his office and showed them the video. From what I am told, the chief then borrowed his very much not soundproof office and chewed the guy a new one. I have no clue what that guy's motivation was, suing the station, maybe, but I am forever a big fan of security cameras in businesses. Worked in one of the oldest buildings in my college town. It was once a Wild West saloon where 2 people were documented to have been killed in a shootout when the state was still a territory. In the 1920s, it served as someone's house, where the youngest daughter was documented to have died in childhood. When I got hired on, even the owners talked about it being haunted. I have never truly seen a ghost or had an encounter, but something about the building, particularly the office in the back and definitely the dirt basement, did not feel right to me at all. Not malevolent, but always off. My first closing shift after I got promoted to keyholder, I was also helping a new girl who had really taken the whole ghost spiel she got a few days prior to heart. This particular store ranged from small little treasures that were almost too easy to steal to a few items that cost 5 times the going rate for tuition at the local college. Naturally, the owners had 15 cameras installed that played on a live feed in the office and in the storefront for customers to see, so they knew they were not being slick. I was counting the drawer, and she was anxiously watching the security camera, just waiting to see something crazy. I was putting the final totals into a calculator when she screamed. She called me over to the camera feed, and there it was on the top right feed, very clearly. There was what looked like a figure in a white, boxy nightgown type dress. We were both near pissing our pants, but we could not leave. There was still a bunch of stuff to get done, and the owners and the opener tomorrow would be pissed if we just ditched the last half of the closing responsibilities on account of a ghost. We watched it, stunned, as it appeared to sway. Suddenly, a huge spider obscured the view of the figure. We, 2 grown women, had been near tears for what felt like ages because we had been watching a fucking spider web that the air conditioning blew into view of the camera. Breaking the rules, but I caught something that ended up being surprisingly wholesome. I have a brick house, and the mailbox is bolted to it. Somehow, one side managed to come loose, so it had been dangling for a couple of weeks since I just did not have a chance to get to the hardware store. I got home from work one day, and it was bolted back properly. I checked to see if there was a note or anything, but nope. On the one hand, I was really grateful, but on the other, I was kind of spooked and wondering if I was totally losing it and maybe it had never come loose after all. Also, I have kind of half kidding, half serious thoughts that my house is haunted, so this definitely added to that feeling. A couple of days later, I remembered I have cameras and could check to see if they caught anything. Turns out an older guy with a tool belt just casually walked up, fixed my mailbox, and left. He was not there for more than 3 or 4 minutes. Eventually, I was able to piece together that one of my neighbors was having some roofing work done, and this was one of the workers. I guess he had just seen my mailbox dangling for a few days and decided that since I was not making any moves to fix it, he would. I had not been living there for that long, and it really warmed my heart to know someone would go out of their way to perform a simple good deed for a stranger. Bit of backstory: I rent the upper floor of my best friend's house, so we see each other quite often, and I use the kitchen and the washer and stuff like that. One day, while we were at uni, someone broke into the place. Nothing was stolen, but the house was a disaster. So I checked the footage from the camera we have out front. See the guy go in. Do not see him come out. Called the police. Checked the entire house. Nowhere to be seen. I do not have neighbors, which added to the strangeness of the situation. Well, turns out the guy was on the fucking roof. He was up there a good week before we realized anything. He is now facing trial. It started out being slightly creepy, but it ended up being really funny. I have external cameras with night vision all around my house. My family and I were on vacation several time zones west of our house. One night, right before I was about to go to bed, I got an alert and logged in to see what was going on. I saw a car pull into my driveway and 4 people get out, acting all sneaky and stealthy. It was well past midnight at my house, and this did not look good. I called my wife and kids in to watch. I was preparing to call the police in my hometown. We saw them all sneak away and toilet paper a neighbor's house. They then ran back to their car in my driveway and sped off. My family and I laughed so hard. It was a highlight of that vacation. This happened about 3 to 4 years back. I lived on a pretty short street, about 25 houses. We had recently set up cameras because we were having some really bad issues with this neighbor. Most people on the street knew each other, we would all barbecue and party together, and we all collectively hated this family. Their son, who I will keep unnamed, was one nasty son of a bitch. He pulled a knife out and pointed it at me from about 20 feet away, tried to get his dogs, 2 big pit bulls, to attack me, and we were pretty sure he stole our quad. I will not go into that, I have already gotten far off track. But we set up the cameras solely because of him. One night, he snuck out of his house and came over to ours. Had no clue why he was coming to our house, but whatever. He got about halfway up our lawn, then stopped, noticed the cameras, and did some weird creepy smile thing where he tilted his head a bit. He ended up leaving, and we decided not to do anything because we were moving very shortly anyway. Supposedly, he has also moved, but out of state. Hope to never see that delinquent again. Guy was living inside one of the broken down cars out by the barn at my parents' house during the winter. We lived about 10 miles from the closest town that had anything to offer, and from there, many miles to any other town. He was likely a drifter or homeless, and we honestly did not do anything about it. Just kept mindful that he was there during the nights in case something shady ever went down, but nothing ever did. I think he really just needed somewhere to sleep that was not outside. It was surely still freezing cold, but better than the alternative. He left and never returned after winter passed. When it had been a few weeks since we saw him on the cameras at night, we went and looked inside the car, so many empty cans of beanie weenies. I hope he managed to find his way to another area that did not turn him away or was able to get himself into a job and a real home. I installed a ring cam and lock on my gate as couriers and postmen kept leaving it open, and my dogs would run down the street. Nothing too out of the ordinary for the first year. I just bought a solar panel for it since I always forgot to charge it, installed it, and let the solar panel charge up the camera from flat to see how much charge it would give. Worked like a charm, and even in the low amount of sunlight it got in the morning during winter, it was more than enough to keep the camera going non-stop. Literally 2 days later, I get home from work, and my camera is missing, ripped off the post, and the solar panel destroyed. Checked the footage. Someone came up, ripped it from the post, put it in their pocket, and walked off with it. However, the person that stole it was an ex-work colleague who looked directly into the camera before taking it. Previous footage shows his car driving past the house and parking down the road. I had not worked with the guy for over 2 years, and I never told him where I lived. Anyway, now that guy has a criminal charge against him, and I have cameras and floodlights absolutely everywhere around my house.